Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 13 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and joining us my dad, Peter.
Hey there. How you doing tonight, Pod World?
The Pod World? Could just say internet?
Internet. The Google machine people.
The Googleverse. All right. That's someone who's not a millennial for you there.
That's right.
Listeners. All right. So yes, this is College Football Throwdown, a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. And we're here today to talk about the biggest games of Week 3 and tease what's coming up in Week 4. And one of the things we kind of wanted to start off the podcast with, going off of a previous podcast, we were talking, there was a whole spiel back in Week 2 about how the SEC had 10 teams in the top 25, and that was like the most that had ever happened for a single conference. And so all this talk about how Ohio State wasn't deserving and all that sort of stuff, we kind of went into that on the last podcast. And then as it turns out this week, a couple major SEC teams lose their games, and now the top two teams in the country are Ohio State and Michigan State, two Big Ten teams. So just goes to show that you can never predict these things, especially this early on in the season. We are still figuring out what all these teams are about.
And that's the interesting thing is that, obviously people need to fill time, and so they're compelled to talk about what they think is interesting. The issue is not talking about the subject and making the observation. The issue is drawing conclusions and making suggestions about relative talent and relative strengths of conferences at this early juncture. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's not about where you are now, it's about where you're going to be, in about 12 weeks. Keep in mind that it was about this time, just a week or so removed from when Ohio State looked pretty awful against Virginia Tech, last year, and then eventually they were a totally different football team by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And so it is that evolution of the team, and injuries and all that stuff play out the way they're going to play out this year will determine so many aspects of this.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice transition, actually, because this week Ohio State kind of struggled unexpectedly, not exactly looking like the undefeatable number one team in the nation against Northern Illinois. In the bar where I was watching the Nebraska game, that game was going on at the same time, so I was sort of watching that in little bits and spurts. But it seems like Ohio State's really struggling with this two-quarterback scenario, not really finding a gel there on their offense. It seems like their defense was kind of what saved them there at the end of the game.
Yes, and the bottom line is that's why you often will hear people talk about how two quarterback systems never work. It's just very hard from a getting into sync standpoint, and to not be looking over your shoulder or your teammates be thinking maybe the other guy could be doing better than you are. And so as soon as you don't have perfect performance, there's immediately the conversation about whoever the other guy is. And so when you have two quarterbacks, you have none. That's an old adage from coaching, is if you think if you've got two quarterbacks, you really have none. And I think that's where the blessing of riches that Ohio State had. They went into the season, and you may recall when we talked about that decision for Ohio State. I mean, I was surprised that he didn't go with J.T. Barrett, but maybe the reason why he didn't is for precisely this reason: what we're experiencing right now. One kid tends to be a little off the handle with his social media and things of that nature, and Cardale Jones, and that lack of discipline and not conscious of team implications is not a great characteristic to have on your team leader quarterback, and that's what's showing up. So quite frankly, by having a guy like JT to go to in the bullpen, now JT can emerge as the guy who pulls it back together. it won't shock me at all if JT's the starter going into this week, and he pretty much solidifies the job as his own, and Cardell is going to sit in the background for the most part after this. That's what I would see.
This is one question I had watching that. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that both quarterbacks continue to struggle. Does Urban Meyer grab Braxton Miller out of his H-back position and throw him back in quarterback?
No, I think only under injury force situation does that happen. No, I think that he will stay with those two quarterbacks, knowing that both of them are capable of doing very well with the offense. And I think you'll see these early season struggles again go away because teams will get better. They just do. And Ohio State will get better. So, but I just think that ultimately he's going to end up landing on JT as his starter and Cardell as the backup.
All right. And then on the previous podcast, we had some predictions. The one we predicted was the Auburn-LSU game. You had said that LSU was going to win 31-21, and I said LSU was going to win 28-14. Turns out both of us were wrong because they ended up winning 45-21 in a pretty dominating performance against Auburn.
Yeah, I think I did indicate in our conversation on that podcast, though, that LSU had the chance to do just exactly what they did. Mm-hmm. That there was that potential, certainly more so than the other way around, just because of what we had already seen from Auburn and the fact that they were playing at LSU, which is a tough place to play.
Yeah. So I'll give you the nod on that one. However, we didn't call a score, but we talked a little bit about the BYU-UCLA game.
Yes.
And I was of the opinion that BYU was going to lose, but it was going to be a close game. And you thought that UCLA would win, perhaps comfortably. And as it turned out, it was a 24-23 win for UCLA. BYU was actually winning for a good portion of that game.
Right. And again, they continued to overachieve in my mind with regard to their ability to slow down some of these offenses that I have great respect for, like UCLA's and Boise State's, and they completely shut us down for a half. So you got to give a lot of credit to BYU for finding a way to do that.
Yeah. Although, admittedly, from what I was reading of the summary, UCLA had several turnovers as well. Like, they made big mistakes, and that's what kept BYU in the game, I think.
Mm-hmm. I didn't get a chance to watch the first half. I did stay up very late for here in the Eastern time zone and watched it to the end. So I did see the end of the game. But I was watching that crazy Alabama versus Ole Miss game until that was over, and then switched over to the BYU-UCLA game.
Yeah, I was actually at a party with some friends, but I was keeping an eye on the score a little bit, and I was legitimately shocked, like, holy crap, Alabama's going to lose. And I did see the highlight of that insane pass that went off the guy's head or whatever and got caught for a touchdown. That was crazy.
That is crazy, man. But and what a great week of college football. I mean, not just the Ohio State struggles, the great back and forth of that Alabama Ole Miss game, which really, I mean, neither of those teams looked to be tremendous defensively, but yet there were times when both of them played very, very good defensively. So it was just amazing how they kind of neutralized each other. And then you have that BYU game, and then you had our crazy game, Nebraska versus Miami with the big comeback, and then the disastrous overtime. And you just had some other good games, the Florida State and Clemson games. The two of the ACC powers both struggled mightily in their games on Thursday and Friday. So I mean, there were just so many circumstances. Oh, and Arkansas loses again to Texas Tech. Kind of love to see that after he opened his big mouth the way he did.
Yeah. Well, I talked about that a little bit at the end of our Nebraska-specific podcast, how this season thus far, these 3 weeks, have been maybe even more chaotic than college football usually is. There's always upsets and crazy things going on, but it really has been crazy with BYU, doing their thing. and then all the other crazy upsets and just close games that people didn't expect, are just, it's just been a really entertaining 3 weeks of college football so far. This being the best so far, I would say.
Yes, and that's been nice. I mean, it just seems like we've had some really good games each week. I would like to hope that maybe the Big Ten down the road would embrace the idea of opening its conference season a little earlier and starting to have more conference games in these first 4 weeks, so that you could have some non-conference games later in the season, much like the SEC does, because it gives them the opportunity to kind of have a bye week later in the year to prep themselves for a title run, frankly, and gear up for typically your rivalry game at the end of the season, and then a potential conference championship game. I think there's a lot of intelligence in doing that, and I'd like to see the Big Ten duplicate what the SEC's doing in that scheduling approach.
But at the same time, like we've talked about, early on in the year, there's a good chance that a lot of these teams aren't going to be gelling 100%, and working out the kinks of summer and, everything like that. So that's why it's nice to have the non-conference games, especially if they're against lesser opponents at the beginning, so you can kind of figure out who you are as a team before you get into conference play, when those losses really matter.
Right. Well, and that's why they have historically done that. It's much more distinctive, and frankly, it's much more fair if you do it that way, where everything's non-conference, and then the conference season starts, and you stay in conference exclusively until the conference is over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this was an interesting one. I kind of saw some highlights from it. Missouri 9, Connecticut 6. An ugly game on the Missouri side, even though they won at the end of the day.
Well, and Missouri has struggled a number of times this year. They have not looked like, the potentially, high, top 25 type team that everybody has pegged them as. And I think they might still be in the top 25, but they sure haven't played like it. They might eventually get to that, but they're not looking like it right now.
Yeah, actually, I believe they are number 25. That's where they are right now.
Okay.
Another big game, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech. Notre Dame wins 30-22. Their backup quarterback continuing to do pretty well.
And that actually that was not as close as that sounds.
Mm-hmm. So Georgia Tech scored late there.
Well, and just in general, in terms of control of the game, stuff that seemed to me in the amount of time I was able to enjoy that game, that when I ever was watching it, my perception was that Notre Dame was generally in control of that game most of the way.
Mm-hmm. And then another interesting game in the SEC, Georgia, South Carolina. Georgia puts 52 points up against South Carolina's 20. Pretty dominating performance there.
Yeah, I think that speaks in two ways. Number one, Georgia's really good again, which Georgia's always pretty darn good. But number two, South Carolina is down quite a bit, because right now they have no quarterback, and if I remember correctly, South Carolina's quarterback is hurt, and so they're in trouble.
Gotcha. And then another one of the big upsets was USC, who I believe was ranked number 6 at the time, losing to Stanford, who really kind of needed that after their Week 1 loss. Was kind of a big boon for them.
Right, and it's going to be interesting to see how much Stanford continues to improve as the season progresses, because they didn't look like the team that we expected in that Week 1 game against Northwestern. But you had the feeling they had some talent, and it's like, when was it going to get together? And it looks like maybe it's gotten together.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that was most of the games I wanted to talk about. The other, I guess, one was within the Big Ten. Northwestern beat Duke 19-10. They've had a pretty good start to their year.
Well, now, see, I want to talk about that a little bit more. I'm here to tell you that's a huge win for Northwestern. And I think it just shows so much about what that team is right now. And if I were to suggest to you the team that looks like it's probably playing the best football, it would be Northwestern and Wisconsin in that Big Ten West. Northwestern really has surprised me with how complete of a football team they have appeared. to be.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but Duke was considered by some people the favorite in that game, right?
I believe that is true, yes. And certainly a team that people had high expectations for going into this season in that game.
Yeah, so that's interesting, kind of see how the power dynamics have played out. Some teams in the SEC, like Georgia, have clearly gone up, whereas others have gone down. But you certainly have to be happy if you're a Michigan State fan, being ranked number 2 this early in the season and being, it being a little bit more questionable in terms of who's going to win that division between them and Ohio State.
Right, absolutely. I think, and I think Michigan State thrives on the whole underdog role a little bit more. So, being number 2 to Ohio State is probably the best place they would like to be, knowing that game's out in front of them and they can attack it as the underdog.
Right. Well, and we talked about this a little bit on last week's podcast, but your whole speculation about the possibility of maybe Ohio State and Michigan State going to the college football playoff, depending on how things play out, does seem possible, given them being number 1, number 2 right now. That would suggest that.
Well, yeah, but again, I would state as I did then that it's way too early for that. It's just kind of fun to think about and throw out there into the dialogue, if you will, so that to combat the constant SEC drone that appears on ESPN.
Good old ESPN. All right, and then talking about Week 4, it's a little bit of a lull compared to the last week, although there are still some good games. I see one here, Utah at Oregon, a good Big 12 game. Or not Big 12, Pac-12.
Yeah, the Pac-12 actually has a number of really nice matchups that I think are going to be very interesting to watch. But for the most part, the rest of the nation doesn't have a huge list of great matchups. You had mentioned that BYU Michigan game, and that's going to be interesting only because BYU's already played Nebraska, Boise State, and UCLA, and played them very well, even in their loss to UCLA.
I hadn't really thought of that, but I guess because BYU is like an independent, and so they have to kind of build up their credibility, as it were, if they want to have a legitimate shot at being considered for that playoff. That's a tough 4-game start, like by anybody's estimation.
Absolutely. And 3 of those on the road. And much like some other things, like in baseball or NFL football, when you have to play that final game in a long stretch, that's a tough stretch. It's the hardest to get up for that because you're mentally spent from the previous tough games that you knew you had to get through first, right? And so for being the 4th game in that sequence, I think Michigan is getting BYU just at the right time. They're beat up. They've lost some guys, and they are just finding their identity as a football program at Michigan with their new coach. So I think it's a perfect storm for Michigan to make a national statement against a team that most people now would acknowledge is a pretty good football team in BYU.
Yeah. Personally, I'm crossing my fingers that BYU beats them so that Nebraska's record looks better and that Michigan just loses, but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. USC at Arizona State.
UCLA.
No, USC at Arizona State. UCLA at Arizona.
Yeah.
Both teams, both matchups in that Pac-12 that look really attractive. So this is the Pac-12 weekend, man. This is some great matchups. A lot of the SEC teams are playing lesser schools. A lot of the Big Ten teams are playing lesser schools. Notre Dame's playing UMass. Now, Tennessee at Florida is a big game in the SEC. What do you call it? The SEC East. So that should be an interesting one within the SEC that'll draw some interest. And you can't forget the Ohio Bobcats at Minnesota. What a huge game that's going to be.
Oh yeah, well Ohio has actually gone off to a great start for their season.
Yeah. What is their record?
They're 3-0.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, we beat Damn, I'm forgetting we beat somebody in week 2. It's like a rivalry game, so we got to take home the trophy kind of thing.
So you already played a conference game.
Yeah, I'm blanking on who that is now, but that would be interesting. Minnesota is probably going to win that game, but if my alma mater could pull it off, that would be interesting.
Oh, I would love that. That would be awesome. That would be funny.
Alrighty.
Hey,
then.
did you notice on a totally separate side note is the Marching 110 was just named the number one college band in the land.
Yeah, well, I think we've won that in previous years as well, but it is good to see us getting that. Also, we're the number one party school again.
Yeah.
So I saw
that was not so great.
I saw that getting posted as well. So.
Too funny. Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's looking like it's a nice slate of games. It's not the best slate, but it's weeks like this where there's a lot of not expected to be good games, where surprising, crazy things always happen. So I'm gonna suggest that there's going to be 1 or 2 games this weekend that are going to really open people's eyes and like, wow, I can't believe that happened. As well as, of course, whatever happens with the big matchups. So like always, the college football will deliver, even when the slate of games doesn't look like it's very good.
Do you want to predict the Utah at Oregon game? That seems like the biggest
sure.
game.
Well, you know what? I don't think that one's very hard. I think Oregon wins, and I think it's not even close. I think Oregon wins big.
Yeah. I guess, Utah, they're the team that beat Michigan first thing.
Now, I would suggest the UCLA at Arizona and the USC Arizona State. Those 2 games would be really good ones to pick. I would probably go in both cases with the California schools. I would pick UCLA over Arizona and USC over Arizona State, even though both of the Arizona schools are at home. I'm going to predict USC and UCLA scores. I'm not sure I could go too close on that, but I just have a feeling that UCLA and USC are going to come out victorious. USC, after that loss to Stanford, they're going to be on fire. They're going to be so mad.
All right. Let's see. I like the UCLA game and Arizona game is probably the biggest game because UCLA is now number 9, so actually ranked ahead of Oregon. Kind of interesting to think of that because Oregon lost to Michigan State. So I'm going to go ahead and say I agree with you. I think UCLA wins that game even though they're on the road after that tough trial against BYU. But I think it could be close, so I'll go ahead and predict a, let's say, 28-24 victory.
Okay. Wow. All right. Cool.
All right. Are you going to have a score for that one?
On the UCLA Arizona?
Yeah.
I'm going to say that. Boy, it's going to be high scoring. I think it's going to be like 35-28 UCLA.
All right. I was thinking about that too, so I might get mad that I didn't stick with that. We'll see. All right. So 35-28. I'm jotting these down now so we can keep our records good.
Yes, so we can keep track. Outstanding. Sounds good. And on the global subjects of college football, I don't really have anything to hit on the national scene other than the fact that I think we've already had a great start to the season. And as I had indicated early on one of our earlier podcasts, that I was optimistic that this was going to be a great college football season just from an overall interest and excitement standpoint. And I think it's playing out that way so far. I think you could make arguments right now for any number of teams that might be the best, especially after Ohio State, which many thought was a shoo-in, had struggled. There's not anybody that's got it all together right now. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good teams, but no great ones.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree with that. There's definitely a lot of uncertainty now, and that makes for interesting conversation. You had actually, I remember before the season began, talked about how you thought that this Ohio State team had the potential to be like a 95 Huskers-esque, like really historically strong football team. How are you feeling about that thought now?
I would have to concede that they have not come out of the blocks with that level of proficiency and efficiency that the Nebraska team did. So I would say that that prediction is probably going to fall to the wayside. But I'll still stay with it that I still think that once they figure themselves out, and I hope that Urban Meyer is smart enough to figure it out, that he needs to go with JT Barrett at quarterback, let Cardell do whatever it is he's going to do, hopefully respond in the right way and be a good teammate, and just let JT lead the team.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty then. Well, I think that wraps up our discussion of Week 3 and preview for Week 4 of this great sport called college football. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can find us on podomatic.com. Our footballthrowdown.podomatic.com is our website. We're on iTunes. Give us ratings and reviews. We like to hear from you guys. Comments on anywhere we post the podcast is also appreciated.
And we didn't get any questions last week, so I hope we can get a question or two maybe out of somebody who's listening and enjoying the podcast. We'd love to hear from you.
Yep, we always love interacting with the fans. All right, so thank you, Dad, for joining me. I know this is a long, we record these podcasts back to back, so it's a long thing, and you have it later than I do since you're on the East Coast, but you're a soldier. You're powering through it.
That's right.
All right.
All right, sir. Hey, have a great week, everybody, and let's have a great weekend of college football. And for us Husker fans, go Big Red.